Hello again, everyone. My name is Doug Burson, CPA, and today we're going to talk about PPP loan forgiveness. Now, on Wednesday, November the 18th, the U.S. Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service finally released guidance on the deductibility of expenses that were paid with PPP funds. If you remember my last video, we talked about whether we should apply yet. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, but I wanted to make sure you understood all the moving pieces and the fact that maybe, because they hadn't decided yet, if we didn't apply till next year, we could use the recognize the expenses this year and then have to take those back off next year because they hadn't said yet. Well, now they have. And so we need to really talk about what that means. So what did they say? Well, what they said is this, and I'm going to quote, "Since businesses are not taxed on the proceeds of a forgiven PPP loan, the expenses are not deductible. This results in neither a tax benefit nor tax harm since the taxpayer has not paid anything out of pocket." And so what they're saying is, hey, look, we gave them the money for free. We didn't make them count it as income. So therefore, they're not going to be allowed to deduct the expenses. Continuing on, if a business reasonably believes that a PPP loan will be forgiven in the future, expenses related to the loan are not deductible whether and this is important, whether the business has filed for forgiveness or not. Therefore, we encourage businesses to file for forgiveness as soon as possible. So in other words, one of the things we talked about in the last video was timing. When should we apply for forgiveness? Because it could have some serious implications on our taxes. Well, now they're saying we don't care whether you apply yet or not. If you don't apply till next August, because you had a reasonable expectation, and by reasonable what they mean is you did what you were supposed to. You used the money how they told you to use it, so you know you're going to have those expenses. You know that you're going to have the loan forgiven because you followed the rules. So therefore, you have a reasonable expectation right now that it's going to be forgiven. So continuing on, they said, in the case where a loan was expected to be forgiven and it is not, businesses will be able to deduct those expenses. So in other words, if you had a reasonable expectation, you thought you did everything right, so therefore we don't take the deductions this year, and then next year you submit it and gets denied because you didn't. I'm not sure what would have happened if you expected it, but maybe you just didn't do something right or you misunderstood. Well, you can deduct it next year then, but for as far as for this year, you can't claim the deduction. So what does this mean for you? Well, for a lot of you, what you've done, and that includes a lot of our clients, we showed the loan as a liability, and then we showed the expenses as incurred because they had not yet been forgiven. What that means simplistically is if your income statement says you made $50,000 and you had $50,000 of PPP money that's going to be forgiven, your actual profit is $100,000 because you have to take those expenses back out because it wasn't your money. So what it really means simplistically is your tax debt liability just went way up and you may not be planning on it. So if that's you, and especially, well, not just especially, but if you are my client and we're doing your books, we need to take a look at this quick. We need to be discussing it, and we need to contemplate on maybe we need to go ahead and purchase some equipment, do whatever, and we can talk about that one-on-one. But you need to be aware of this change because this change is really, really huge. But unfortunately, like everything else this whole year, that's not the end of the story. So as I told you, I believe I did anyway in the last video, that the Senate Finance Committee had tried to put some stuff together, but it really never got any traction. But there was a lot of belief that it would, but they got caught up in, well, it doesn't matter, politics, election, I don't know. That's above my pay grade. What I know is it just never happened. Well, on November 19th, the very next day, I'm going to quote this, a little bit of it anyway, the Senate Finance Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley from Iowa and the ranking member Ron Wyden from Oregon have criticized Treasury's latest PPP guidance on deductibility as missing the mark. So this is bipartisan, that's good news. And since the CARES Act We've stressed that our intent was for small businesses receiving loans to receive the benefit of their deductions for ordinary and necessary business expenses. So in other words, what they're saying is, all along, from their perspective anyway, Congress intended for us to be able to not only not have to recognize income from getting the PPP money, but they also intended us to be able to deduct the expenses. They did not want us incurring a big tax debt next year and pulling that money back out to make a stress on small business owners. So that's what they're saying. And this hopefully really got them amped up to follow through with this. The problem is there's not many days left for Congress to get this done before the end of the year. So will they get it done? I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I hope so. I think it makes sense. But you need to be aware that the rules could change again on us. It could be in the next week or two. It could be in January or February. We really don't know. So long story short, you probably need to talk with your tax professional, if that's me. We may need to have a quick conversation, discuss where your numbers are, what it means, and if you need to consider making some tax changes before the end of the year. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's clarified some of this. And like everything, you know it's subject to change. So talk to you later. Back and forth, fights, bye. This is stupid.